Hello viewers and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present an exclusive preview featuring two upcoming cards for the Chaos faction from our upcoming Decree of Ruin War Pack, the first release of the Planetfall cycle of war packs. These cards were provided by Fantasy Flight Games, but presented courtesy of Team Covenant, and thank you to Zach Bunn in particular for his original write-up and reveal of these cards. But without further ado, let's move on to our spoilers. First up, we see the Ravenous Psychopath, a 2-cost army unit with 1 command icon, 1 attack value, 3 hit points, and the Cultist, Khorne, and ally traits. Her ability reads Reaction. After this unit resolves an attack, deal 1 damage to this unit to deal 1 damage to an enemy army unit at the same planet. So, for a faction in dire need of fewer than 3 resource cost units, this provides any Chaos Warlord another readily affordable unit option. It comes with a command icon, so it obviously has built-in potential to win you cards and resources, but more importantly, it's exceptionally durable relative to its price, with 3 printed hit points, making it an unlikely target for being sniped by a solo enemy warlord. But the obvious allure inherent to this card is that reaction. The Ravenous Psychopath only attacks for 1. As soon as it resolves an attack, whether or not it manages to successfully deal any damage, you can opt to deal your own army unit 1 point of damage in order to also deal out a point of damage to a target enemy army unit that happens to be at the same planet. So this affords Chaos players still another answer to fighting multiple low-cost units. You could have the Ravenous Psychopath attack and kill off a Chimera, or perhaps Termagant token, and then once its attack is resolved, you have your Psychopath deal itself a point of damage, in order to deal out a point of damage to any target enemy unit, maybe a Kith's Chimera Masters, or a unit with the Hive Mind specialization. Plus, I think it's important to note that even if the point of damage your Psychopath assigns to itself will ultimately result in suicide, you still do manage to assign damage to an enemy army, because that cost is considered paid before the damage is ultimately resolved. And of course, there's absolutely nothing preventing you from shielding against that damage, should you choose to do so. But to make things still better, let's consider some card synergy. If you're running Zerathur, you always want to play cards that cause as many individual instances of damage possible. So, alongside our Tzeentchian Chaos Warlord, this Khornate army unit attacks to assign 2 damage and can subsequently trigger its reaction to assign another 2 damage, potentially to the same target or otherwise to 2 different targets. And because Zerathur's damage amplification only affects the enemy, the Psychopath's reaction is, in a sense, quite similar to an Orc cannon. Plus, I think it's also very cool when you stop and consider that because you're dealing out 2 instances of damage, your opponent will have to shield twice if they'd like to prevent all of it, and therefore it increases the likelihood of your opponent either wasting a 2 or 3 value shield card or simply opting not to shield in the first place. And in my opinion, the more value you can wring out of any card, the better. But still further, I think it's also worth considering that if you are running Zerathur, that cost of 2 makes it a perfectly eligible target to be put into play through Infernal Gateway, so you can unexpectedly effectively deal 4 damage between an attack and a card effect. And alongside Zerathur's Flamers, this is just another means for our Chaos Sorcerer piloting player to front load a potential potentially absurd amount of damage. And considering that respectable pool of 3 hit points, even when playing this unit conventionally, I think it's still relatively likely to survive until it can get off at least 1 attack during the first combat round on your enemy. But what about cultist trait synergy? Once your ravening psychopath has started to take damage, or perhaps best when it's nearly dead, and ideally once it's exhausted after attacking, you could sacrifice it either to heal a copy of the 3 attack, 5 hit point Ravenous Fleshhounds, or you could instead ready a 5 attack, 5 hit point Ancient Keeper of Secrets. And once that cultist leaves play, regardless as to how or why, if you're atypical enough to try running 1 or more copies of Murder Cogitator, you could then exhaust each of those supports to reveal the top card of your deck, one after another, to potentially gain the benefit of significant card draw, so long as the cards you happen to reveal end up being chaos units. But as none of those cards are too often played, and we've yet to see a true cultist trait deck, I still think there's an as of yet undiscussed wealth of synergy available to the Ravening Psychopath. For instance, once we see Barzul the Hatebound, our upcoming 3rd Cornate Chaos Faction Warlord released, when the Ravening Psychopath goes to deal itself 1 point of damage via its reaction, you can instead reassign that damage to your present Hail Warlord, expediting his bloodying process. And if Barzul is your chosen Warlord, then whether or not the Psychopath is damaged, you can use Blood for the Blood God to assign 1 point of damage to all undamaged enemy units, then attack with the Psychopath, add even more damage to a target enemy, and then you're entirely free to follow it up with a Warp Storm. So, taken all together, certainly, in my opinion, a very exciting new unit, and one that I'm definitely personally curious to try, but considering it also has the ally trait, always remember in the back of your mind that at any point, it might be routed by a Space Marines Imperial Fist siege force, or perhaps forced to be sacrificed through the Dark Eldar event Despise. But, with our first spoiler now thoroughly covered, we're on to the next. We have the 2-cost event, Sowing Chaos. With 1 shield icon and the tactic trait, it reads Deploy action. Destroy each army unit with printed cost 2 or lower at each technology planet, blue. So, our current meta heavily favors playing many, low-cost units and attempting to swarm one's opponent, over investing an equivalent number of resources in fewer, albeit more powerful cards. That way, you get more attacks, you have more units, and therefore you're more likely than when playing Elite Heavy to get the utmost value out of every single point of attack power. And by running many individually fragile units, you also maximize the chance of your opponent wasting some of their own attack value and killing off units that have only a handful of hit points in the first place. Plus, you're more likely to win multiple command struggles and are less likely to have wasted command icons. We've also seen many effects which easily answer and counter individual, albeit formidable units, such as Archon's Terror, Klavex Warleader, even Inquisitorial Fortress, and innumerable other effects. But if there's anything Chaos does well, it's unit destruction and damage in mass, and something this game sorely needs, in my opinion, is an answer to swarms of inexpensive units, so I'm therefore quite pleased to see an event like this one released. Note that Sowing Chaos is a deploy action, and it only affects blue technology icon possessing planets, and notably it affects your own units in addition to your enemy. But if you establish an economy knowing full well that you have 1 or more copies of this card in your deck, you can simply deploy only 3+ cost units to blue technology planets in theory, and save your 2 or fewer resource units for planets of any other color or type. So, you deploy your Chaos Fanatics and Void Pirates to either Strongpoint or Material planets, green and red respectively, and save your Khorne Berserkers and Chaos Demons for blue Technology planets. And if that method of deploy tactic bothers you and you find yourself needing an elite at a non-blue planet at some point, we'll eventually see in our Planetfall cycle the support Corrupted Teleportarium, which allows you the opportunity to relocate elites from blue planets to any other planets. Or, of course, if your opponent has simply managed to outpace you in regard to building an economy, this could be a great means of catching up to them. Or even better yet, if you've managed to deploy stall your opponent and they've put themselves into a compromised position, you could simply play this event, scour the Traxxas sector of their units, and then serve to play out your own 2 or fewer cost army units out to blue planets entirely safely. But the obvious problem with this card is that it might be a little too conditional to play often and in any deck. I love it in theory, but it costs 2, it only has 1 shield icon, it only affects 6 out of the 10 planets, and it potentially endangers some of your own units. I think Warp Storm, for instance, is far more versatile, especially when you stop to consider that Sowing Chaos doesn't affect any tokens, synapse, or warlord units. An overwhelming Chimera Swarm or Horde of Termagant tokens remains entirely exempt from this event's effects, whereas a Warp Storm or Gleeful Plague Beast would immediately all but certainly eradicate them. So perhaps there will come a time when Sowing Chaos comes into vogue, but as an inclusion within the first of our Planetfall war packs, I can't help but think it's a plant for a deck that we've quite yet to see. But now that we've covered both of our exciting new Chaos faction spoilers, I want to take just a moment to thank Fantasy Flight Games for releasing these previews in the first place, and of course Team Covenant for presenting them on their website. For a look at the original reveal article by Zach Bunn, check my description below. But with that said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're always encouraged to share this content, as the more eyes there are on these videos, the more potential players may like what they see, give Conquest a try, join our community, and with us, together send the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I encourage you to do so, be it through Facebook or on Twitter, and of course, if at any point you'd like to give back to the Hive Tyrant, you're welcome to donate $1 or $2 on a strictly monthly basis to my Patreon. But thank you once again for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.